everyone, this is Group 10. So the topic we are introduced today is geopolitics and the reshaping of the global semiconductor supply chain. And we divided our content into 4 different parts. In the beginning, I will give you a brief introduction of our presentation, and then we will dive in 3 different points. You can take a look first. Yeah, so now I will start by giving you an overview of our presentation and let you know what we meant to focus on in our presentation. So let's begin with a simple question. Why semiconductor matters? You can keep this question in mind for a moment. We believe that semiconductors it matters because they are the foundation of modern economies and digital technologies. And then semiconductor, they are also critical inputs for artificial intelligence, smartphone, and also automobiles and even the defense systems. Besides, more importantly, they are increasingly linked to national security and geopolitical competition. It means that semiconductors are no longer just technology products, but it's a strategic assets. Yeah. And then I'll give you a brief overview of the semiconductor supply chain, and we will have 3 main characteristics we are going to highlight. The first one is it is highly fragmented but deeply interdependent global supply chain. And the second one, it consists of several key stages. Like in the beginning, it starts from design to move to fabrication, and then move to packaging and testing, as well as the materials and the equipment. And then it is a strong geographic specialization across different regions. This means that they are strong. They have strong geographic specialization across different regions. Yeah, and in other words, efficiency comes from global division of labors, and the risks accumulate at the same time. So for this sake, it brings us to another question. Next question is why geopolitics has become central. In recent years, the USA and China technology rivalry and export controls it significantly affect the flow of the technology and the knowledge. At the same time, the COVID-19 and geopolitical tensions expose of the vulnerability for the semiconductor supply chain. So as a result, the governments, they are increasingly intervening through industrial and security politics. Against for this background, our presentation focuses on 3 different dimensions. The first one is how geopolitics is reshaping the global semiconductor supply chain, and the second one is the role of the national policies and the cooperative strategies. And the third one is the implication for efficiency, resilience, and global competition. So with this context in mind, we are moving to our main point, the first main point.
So first of all, we're going to see what's our strategic importance and the vulnerabilities of the semiconductor supply chain. So to understand better the stakes around the semiconductor supply chain around the world. So first, it is important to understand the importance of the supply chain of the semiconductors around the world, so the more global scale. So first, the semiconductor industry has a huge impact on the global economy. First, financially, economically, since first, there is growth in terms of value, in terms of money, about the value of this semiconductor industry. It is projected to reach more than almost $800 billion dollars in 2025, which is more than 11% of growth by the 2024 by last year. Also, an important point is that the expected sales are continue growing, and predictions are that the semiconductor industry will reach $1 trillion by 2030, which is a huge growth in the long-term forecast, and that shows also the importance of this industry around the world. The last point of the strategic importance is that semiconductors are everywhere. You can find it in AI, also in cloud computing, automotive, healthcare, and in other words, everywhere. So it's like strengthen the impact of the semiconductors and then the semiconductor industry, supply chain around the world. Then it is important to understand the global chain structure of the supply chain industry. It is true that the supply chain industry lays on 4 pillars, which are design and R&D, manufacturing, materials and equipment, and packaging and testing. So for the design and R&D, we can see that the semiconductor industry is concentrated in the US. Also for the manufacturing, it is more concentrated in Taiwan with, of course, TSSC, which owns almost 70% of the global foundry share, but also a little bit less South Korea with Samsung, which owns 8 or 9% of the market. Also, the material and equipment is mostly dominated in Europe and Japan. And finally, the packaging and testing, which is located in South Asia. So in other words, it shows that the semiconductor industry and supply chain is located in every part of the world, and each part of the world has a specific sector, for example, like the 4 elements. Also, in this context, it is important to understand the vulnerability of the semiconductor industry with this supply chain context. So the most important vulnerabilities of the supply chain industry and supply chain are the geographic concentration, since as we have seen before, almost 70% of advanced manufacturing is located in Taiwan. So if there are regional disruption, I don't know what can happen, but then it can block the whole system around the world. Then there will also be climate risk, since the industry of semiconductors consume more than 40% of the current fabrics. More than 40% of the current fabrics are facing water stress, and more with time. And finally, geopolitical fragmentation, since there is a huge export controls, a lot of things can happen in the States, and all of those elements can totally change the supply chain of the semiconductor industry. So in brief, about the strategic importance and vulnerabilities of the semiconductor supply chain, it is important to know that there is a systemic importance of the semiconductors and a rapid growth of this industry in our daily life in the world. Also, the global supply chain is fragmented around the world with those specific part of the techniques and fragmentation. And it's also highly constrained. And finally, the semiconductor supply supply chain, I'm considering major vulnerability, either geopolitical or with clients. So now I'm going to go to our second part, so about geopolitical forces and reshaping the supply chain. Right now, semiconductors have become like a central battleground for technological leadership and national security. So first, there is obviously the United States and China tech rivalry. So the United States wants to preserve its leadership in advanced technology by limiting China's access to high technology chips. So, and China, on the other hand, wants to restrict its access. So China, on the other hand, is accelerating its effort to achieve semiconductor self-sufficiency. So it invests massively in domestic fabric equipment. So it leads to technological bifurcation between the US and China. So there's like two different technological fields that develop parallelly. So now about export and control, both countries are putting restrictions about importation. So US restrict Chinese semiconductors to importation fell by 53%, and on the other hand, China retaliates with restriction on critical minerals, since it is representing production. Here we can see that every country in all the world are putting like implementing policy in order to boost their production of chips and everything. So US chips action, so it's 52 billion with domestic production and R&D. In Europe, we have the EU Chips Act in order to reach the 20% of global semiconductor production by 2030, and China invested 200 billion in semiconductors. And then we can see that the semiconductor industry is reshaping alliances and creating fragmentation. For example, there is the Quad, it's an alliance of the USA, Japan, Canada, and Australia. Represent 30% of global demand. We have the EU partnership with Japan and Taiwan, and obviously Taiwan is the
Next part, I will talk about like where the global semiconductor market is heading, and leveraging these like more common and companies like working for. So here we're going like moving away from very old model, like we're most like advanced like chip or made in just a couple of places. So mainly you can see that it's more like in Taiwan and South Korea. Now because like geological like tensions and the US and China take rivalry. So companies are spreading like their production across different regions. So we're seeing like more activity like in Japan, the US, and Europe, and even Southeast Asia. So here the idea is simple, like just don't keep all the eggs like in one basket. So next here is like a big trend like is massive government like to push to build a local task. So here is where like the public-private like partnership like really matters. So here you can see that TSMC is building like in Arizona and Japan, and Intel is like building in like Europe and especially in Germany and Ireland. So yeah, none of this like this project like will happening without subsidies like from US Chips and US Chips like Act and then EU Chips Act and then Japan's like industrial like politics. So here semiconductor like manufacturing is no longer just like business decision. So here is like national strategy. So here another point like is like the trade-off like efficiency and resilience. So for biggest, okay, so here like you can see like the companies like now like they want secure and local trusted supply chain. So companies just need to find like a balance and stay efficient, but also like reducing like geological like risk. And the last year, like we cannot just ignore like how chips can become like a diplomatic tool. So here is interesting to see like because even though countries talk about like decoupling, but the reality is that they're still like independent. So and the last one, the policy like recommendations. So in summary, like semiconductor, it's just moving into like more pragmatic, like but also more strategically like important areas. So this is how government and firms like navigate this tension between security and efficiency, shaping these next generation of chip like technologies. And this is our time. Thank you.
So are you suggesting that instead of having global supply chain to evaluate semiconductor industry, maybe next year we should take a deeper look into the multi-hub thing, geopolitical diversion of the industry, right? I think that's the key point I get from your presentation. Multi-hub model for the whole industry. Thank you.